All right, guys, we'll get back to the program. So good morning, everyone. My name is James Willis, if you don't know me. I'm going to be giving my lecture, how to give a lecture. And I kind of realized as I was, I've given this many times, and this was actually my senior lecture when I was a resident. But I realized that we may be entering a new world of lecturing in terms of lecturing on Zoom, and I'm not experienced enough or read up enough on that. So maybe I'll give a supplement down the line of how to lecture on Zoom. But this is primarily talking about how to lecture in person traditionally.
They just need to share your screen.
Oh, I didn't share it, sorry. See, first rule of Zoom lecturing is to share your screen.
Always have one of your chief residents close at hand to help you out with technical issues.
That's right. This PowerPoint. Share. Good?
Yeah, we just need it, yeah. Perfect.
Good.
They see your,
They see my presenter view? So probably share the other, not that.
if you bring it
Oh,
over.
here it is.
Yeah.
All right. So that it will be part of the lecture about media and having a backup. So it's always good to have a partner in the craft who can help you out. So yeah, so this lecture is going to be how to give a lecture, and it is primarily talking about traditional lecturing. It definitely will give you some pointers on general lecture preparation and presentation, but maybe I need to update this about how to present virtually. So an outline, you're going to obviously preparation. I think this is probably the most important thing, and a lot of where most presenters or public speakers who don't do this for a living go wrong, and then definitely for resident presenters, because you guys are busy and it's hard to prep. But I'm going to make a case for just trying to do this a little bit earlier. We'll talk a little bit about presentation tools, mostly PowerPoint, public speaking tips, and then just the reality of you guys being residents and presenting in conference. So why do we care about this? Who cares? I think the easy answer for all of you is that you're going to be lecturing in conference. As the residents who have been here for a couple of years know, that is a requirement of our residency. And we like to have that requirement because it prepares you guys for a life of education and giving lectures. But even if you're not going to be an academician or in the education world, you're always going to have to know how to present your points to somebody, whether it's administratively, in a business situation, or just talking to your consultants. So I think this is good practice in terms of practice in emergency medicine, as well just in a life as a physician. And it's something you can make a career out of if you're really good at it. So as I mentioned, being prepared. So the worst thing I feel like you can do in terms of giving a presentation or public speaking is to be working on this last minute. So I really recommend for the residents who are going to be doing presentations this year, it doesn't mean that you have to have your whole lecture, your whole presentation ready a month in advance, but you should start conceptualizing it, start thinking about what you want to do well in advance. And I usually, when I'm thinking about a new didactic, usually a couple of months, 3 or 4 months, and then I really start drilling down about a month before. And then we all start at this screen, staring at it, thinking about what we're going to do, what we're going to write, probably going off and doing a Google image search. That's something that wastes some time when you're making a presentation. But I'm going to give you some advice on where to start with your presentation. And I think starting with the conclusion, starting with what your learning tips and points are going to be is the best way to start. So choose what you want your audience to get out of this and your the main points. There should really be a maximum of 5. I think the best presentations are usually around 3 points. And then you want to write your conclusion and your outline slide first. And then everything else in the middle can come after that. And this really kind of follows the concept of any professional speakers. You're going to want to tell the audience what you're going to say, then you use the body to tell them, and then you tell them what you said. So I really think when you're preparing a lecture, you should start at those two bookends of your presentation. The next thing you want to do is think about who you're talking to. So know your audience. You want to understand their education level. You want to understand the culture of the room. And what I really want you guys to do is think about what's, this acronym is, what's in it for me. So what does your audience want to get out of the presentation? And then what are their expectations? So if I was giving a presentation on renal failure and treatment of hyperkalemia, and I'm coming to present to you guys, and I spoke about K-Exalate, I would get, Dr. Sinner just looked up from his phone. So I had an immediate guttural emotional reaction. So I should know that coming and presenting to emergency medicine physicians, or at least emergency medicine physicians at Kings County and City Downstate. But if I went and presented to the internal medicine residency and I didn't mention K-Exalate, I probably would get some questions about that. So knowing your room, knowing what the expectations are is important. And for resident lecturers, think about the breadth of experience in the room. You're going to be lecturing to PGY 1s through 4s through 5s, senior faculty, junior faculty, and potentially medical students as well. So having something in there for everybody is important. And if you're talking about a paper that you feel like probably all the PGY 4s and the faculty know about, but you're losing half your audience in terms of the juniors, you really want to think about kind of giving some background about that. So media. So this is something, being education chief and then in charge of conference for years and years and years, I know this becomes a problem all the time. Think about the media that you're using in your presentation or lecture. Kind of think twice about before you just insert that video or have a cool animation or have something that you're going to download from the internet or YouTube. And remember that it may not work on the day. So you either have to test your media, make sure it's going to work where you're projecting, or you need to have a backup. I have a big problem in general of people using YouTube videos or videos as a large part of their presentation because the audience has come to see you speak. So giving that forum to somebody else that you're just projecting, I don't think that's what they want. Taking small clips of that and giving visuals, I think is fine. But just remember that you're the main attraction. So that's what people want to see. And just, you really need to know the setup where you're presenting. I would recommend going the day before or at least a couple of hours before your actual presentation to get an idea of what you have. And have multiple backups. You should have your presentation on Google Drive, your email, a USB drive, because you don't want to be stuck talking with an empty screen if you're really depending on your slides. But you should be able to talk on an empty screen if you don't have it. All right, rehearsal. I think this is something that, again, generally people who aren't professional public speakers and definitely residents don't do enough. So rehearsing your presentation. And it's really weird when you're sitting in front of a mirror or maybe presenting to your significant other. I remember when I was preparing for this as a senior resident and I presented, actually no, I'm sorry, when I was preparing for this for grand rounds when I was a new attending at another institution, and I presented this to my infant child about 40 times. And then he didn't give me great applause or anything, but it was just the practice of saying it out loud. And I promise you, if you go through it a couple of times and you listen to how it sounds and the flow of it, it's going to improve your presentation. And it's not about memorizing it. Sometimes it's helpful to write it down and to write out what you want to say, but you really don't want to be kind of saying the same thing every time. You just want to know what I want to say for every slide. You want to know the timing of your presentation, and you just want to know what's coming next. And presentation notes can help you with that. And usually it's best for them to just do a quick peek and make sure that, oh, did I say everything that I wanted to say? But you shouldn't be relying on reading cue cards or your presentation notes. If you need it, you need it, but it's not the best way to go about it. A great way to do this is to actually record yourself, and in the virtual world, you can even present to people via Zoom or Skype or FaceTime. I've done that for a few people. I hate listening to recordings of myself, so I think I would bring myself to do it, but it is a really great way to kind of understand how you sound, but it's a little painful for most. All right, so be prepared. So remember, think about what your points are, and that's a really good jumping off point for giving a presentation. Don't forget your dongles, just talk. I feel like that's less important these days. I feel like most places you will have that. But remember what kind of presentations and what kind of tools you have, where you'll be projecting, and then practice makes perfect. Rehearsing your presentation, I promise you, is going to help and it's going to make you a much more effective lecturer. All right, so we're just going to talk about a couple of things in terms of presentation. The first thing is audience participation. And I think this is something that residents can work on a lot. And traditionally, when I do this presentation, I do a lot of breakout and audience participation, but I reformatted it with the idea of Zoom and to make it a little shorter. So do as I say, not as what I'm doing right now. And I think any presentation that you have that's going to be over 15 to 20 minutes, you should definitely have some sort of audience participation or breakout. Well, let's go. Let's do it. Let's have some audience participation. How are different ways you can get the audience involved? And anyone at home can unmute themselves if they want.
By asking questions.
So somebody said, ask some questions. So good. Anything else? Anyone at home? Anyone here? What's that?
Polls or games.
So gamification, polls, good.
Directly engage the audience, so like ask someone in the audience.
Calling on people, directly engaging. Good.
Small group discussions.
Perfect. Just right on cue. So I think small group discussions is really the most effective way to have audience participation. It's logistically difficult most of the time, depending on what your room is like. You would need maybe preceptors, but the best way is to break it down to the smallest group possible and have the audience interacting with each other and digesting the material and discussing it, and then bringing them back to talk about it more. So you can either break them up to discuss specific topics. You can give them cases to go over information, and then you can have multiple preceptors in the room, or you just take some of the onus off of you, and you can just walk around and kind of insert yourself into the groups here and there. Somebody mentioned questions, so I think using questions in your presentation is a great way to start the audience with brainstorming. I like pre and post questions a lot of times, so you kind of set up where the audience, what they know and what they thinking they know about a subject, and especially if you're going to kind of give them new information, then you can ask them questions afterwards to kind of really solidify what they learned. And then it also involves you, the audience, having some problem solving. And definitely one of the best is using simulation. I think this is something that we do a lot in medicine now. And getting the audience hands-on experience, getting them moving around, getting them applying what you're teaching them is definitely one of the best ways to kind of get attention. And it doesn't have to be high fidelity. You could have just a role-playing exercise in front of the room. So calling on someone or planning that in advance is helpful. And the reason we do this is a quote from Confucius, but education research shows that after a lecture, only a fifth of the audience is going to retain after 72 hours what you spoke about. It'll move up to half if the audience discusses the presentation, 70% if the learner actually says what you're talking about afterwards, and 90% if the learner then takes that information and then teaches it. So when you interact with the audience and involve them in the education, it's going to help with their retention. All right, so now we're going to talk about PowerPoint and death by PowerPoint. So I'm just going to kind of point out some of the usual faux pas and what I've seen over the years, and maybe just help you guys out. One is crowded slides. So the biggest thing to remember is that the slides are for the audience. They shouldn't be there for you to read off of the slides or to have the information. The human mind works much faster if you can reading than listening. So if you put up a slide that has all your information up, everyone in the audience is going to read it and then totally zone out for the rest of what you're saying. Just remember, they're there to see you and to hear from you. You should have one slide per minute about, just in terms of our attention span, and you should use basic fonts that have a good color scheme. And you should really only have about 4 to 5 lines per slide. If you notice on this slide, all of the text is different sizes, and this is just to kind of highlight that the minimum for any presentation should be what says slides for audience, that's 28. And then 36 should be the heading slides and 28 is with body. And then the bigger 4 to 5 slides per line is 42. So the recommendation is if you're presenting to an audience of over 200 in a room that size, then any body text should be 36 and any heading should be 42. So the professional public speakers kind of really go for this mantra of 10 minutes presentations, 20 slides, and 30 size font. And whether you do this or not, or this is something that you can work within, obviously we give you guys time limits and what you have to do. The idea is that you want to speak for as little as possible, and with maybe some audience participation and breakout. You would like to have the minimum amount of slides, and you want to have your font as big as possible, meaning that you don't want to have text on the slides, a lot of text on the slides. And then again, the slides are for the audience, not for you. So please try not to read off your slides, and the audience is going to be able to read text a lot faster than you're able to say it. So in terms of using animations and slide design, I really hate when people use GIFs and animations, because I think the best way to use it, if you are going to, is put up the animation, let it play once or twice, and then go to a still frame. Because after that, it's just going to be distracting. Be careful with using pointers, mostly because if you're giving a big presentation, you may be nervous, and using a pointer can accentuate that because your hand may be shaking. So just be careful about that. I've had that problem. And then be careful with alternative design of slides, just because it can be distracting. Try to use only about 4 colors on the slide. I actually like to use probably max of 2, black and white, or maybe black and red. That's what I usually use. And then just think about color schemes. You don't want to have colors that clash with each other. It's just going to put people off. So this is just an example of how pictures can really add to what the audience sees, and you really don't want to put a lot of text in the slide. So a slide like this compared to something that looks like this, the second slide is going to be a lot more effective. The picture is obviously jarring, and it gets the point across. And putting up just maybe a statistic or a number is really going to hit home with the audience rather than reading all of this. Another pet peeve of mine is graphs and tables. If you put up a graph or a table in your presentation, you definitely want to spend some time with it. If you're not, if you're just putting up for a couple of seconds, it probably doesn't belong in the presentation. You should walk through it. It shouldn't be too complex that the audience can't follow. And then you never want to apologize for a graph or table. So here's some examples. So you see this a lot, especially for table 1 in studies. No one's going to be able to kind of key in what you want to say. You can highlight it if you want. You can also see that this slide is blurry because it's been maximized. Here's another common one. So this is a large, complicated algorithm, and this is very important if you want to go over ACLS. But no one's going to be able to follow what you're talking about, and people are going to zone out. So a decent solution would be maybe to do this, to zoom in on parts of the algorithm and then highlight them slide by slide. But again, you notice that after zooming in and cropping this, it's blurry. So I'm just going to recommend that you reformat your tables. And this took me 2 minutes on PowerPoint. So take what you want out of it and reformat it if you can't find a slide that's going to help, or a table that you can take directly from the source. All right, so a little bit about public speaking. It's always difficult. It's one of the #1 fears in the world. But there's just a couple of tips that you can do and help you. Again, never apologize. The audience doesn't want to hear it, and it automatically kind of discredits you. Just stand up there, own it, and whatever is in your presentation, just go with it. You've done your work, and don't apologize to the audience. They don't want to hear it. So in terms of nerves, and this is one of the biggest problems, things to think about, rehearsal is really going to be the biggest thing that you can do for this. The more you rehearse, the more you practice, the more you're going to be confident in what you're doing, and you don't have to think about it. So you just present. Professional speakers don't recommend not drinking any coffee, or maybe just drinking the normal amount of coffee that you drink, avoiding alcohol. Bananas actually can help calm your nerves, apparently. And then if it's something that you really have a major fear of public speaking, you can be prescribed a small dose of beta blockers to help. But be careful about doing that the first time in a major presentation because we all know the physiological effects and you could pass out. So definitely something you might want to try first in practice before taking a beta blocker. Think about your hands. I've seen lots of people present, where you may be tapping, clicking a pen, hands in your pockets, hands in the pockets is not the worst thing if you're going to be tapping and doing other things. But ideally, just think about where you have your hands. If you're at a podium, you can, put your hands on the podium, but just think about what you're doing with them. And I think one of the best things that I've learned and have done in presentations, if you're nervous, you get off track and you kind of freeze, just pause for a moment and take a deep cleansing breath, and it usually helps and kind of centers you and you can move forward. So what do you do with the audience? I'm having trouble right now because the majority of you guys are online, but eye contact is important and can be difficult. Something that I've learned and I kind of try to do is to go through the audience in a Z formation, and it kind of just systematically helps you interact and make eye contact with everybody. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to think about who you're speaking to. So you start at one end of the room and you kind of move around in a Z formation and maybe start where you left off every single time. As I mentioned, notes, I don't think it's a great idea. It's detrimental to kind of having that connection with the audience. I think it's something good if you want to look down and remember what you wanted to say or where you were. But obviously, if you're looking down and reading your notes the whole time, you won't be able to make eye contact. Some of the best speakers I've seen move around the whole room. That really keeps the audience engaged because they don't know where you're going to show up. They don't know, the audience doesn't know if you're going to be behind them. I think anyone who remembers Dr. Foley, he did this really well. He would be up at the back of the room presenting, and you all of a sudden realize that he's behind you. So you always have to pay attention, and you always have to know where the speaker is. So humor. I think humor is a great tool for presenters and for public speakers, but you just really have to keep in mind about the humor that you use. Just remember that not everyone's going to have the same ideals and the same thoughts as you, so try to keep it as PC as possible. It will help with the enthusiasm in the room, and I was just saying to some of the chiefs before presenting, I love using it and having a large audience, and you can kind of feed off of that energy. It's a little harder on Zoom. Make sure it's appropriate and make sure it's not controversial because honestly, you'll lose, if you lose somebody and they get pissed off about the humor that you use, then you're never going to get them back and you're never going to kind of learn or interact with what you're talking about. And it's a good transition to use pictures and humor as well. Time management, this is definitely a pet peeve of mine. The ways that you can make sure that you have good time management is that you plan. So know how long the presentation is going to be. Practice your slides so you know how long it takes you to go through these. Time management of the day is also important. As somebody who's run conferences for a while now, you always love when a speaker is early. Then they can be flexible. They can start maybe earlier or maybe even jump a slot in the presentation in the conference day. And that's going to get you invited back or invited to other conferences. And then again, ideally a presentation should probably only be 15 to 20 minutes. I think if you're given a time slot longer than that, then you want to have some sort of breakout. So maybe a case and then give didactics, or you want to maybe have a breakout or a small group session or something to keep in mind. And then ending early is never a problem. I think if you end way early, if you're supposed to give 45 minutes and you only give a 15-minute presentation, that's going to be looked down upon. But if you're ending 5 to 10 minutes early, that's always okay. It's going to save time in the conference day for everyone else. And it gives a time for interaction and group discussion, I think, which is important. All right, so finishing up. So keep calm and finish strong. Something I learned by actually giving this presentation is that you always want to be the last person speaking. So remember when you're giving questions and comments, you want to make sure that you're the last person who has the last word. So we'll talk about that. So ideally, you want to have repeated your main points around 5 times. That's always not possible, but I think at least 3 times throughout your presentation, the 1 or 2 things that you really want to get across the audience, it's ideal to repeat them. So definitely in the objective, the body, and the summary. So you'll say it at least 3 times, but if you can insert those main things that you want to say, then try to incorporate in other places. And then you always want to have that summary slide. That's how you're going to make sure that you have the last word and how you really get everybody the points that you want to get across. I think you should have time for questions, for comments. You should invite them. Though always the concern is that you may not know the answer and you're opening up yourself for scrutiny. But I think in order to get audience participation and everybody involved, I think you need to have that. And again, have the last word. When you're taking questions, the best way to do it, especially in large audiences, is to repeat the question or paraphrase it so that everybody in the audience can know what you're answering, what you're talking about. And then when answering the questions, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You should probably not BS your way through it because someone's going to call you out on it. Or if they don't, it's going to kind of discredit probably everything else you said if you're making something up. I think as a resident speaker, a lot of times you feel like you're not an expert, and I would contradict that because probably you read the literature and read the paper, whatever you're speaking about, more times than anyone else in the room, or at least most recent. And then you probably know more than you think. And then be a good moderator of the audience. Don't let somebody else take over your platform. All right, so just a quick reality check in terms of being a resident speaker. We obviously know that all of you guys are very busy, and doing lectures and presenting is an extra burden. So we know that. And I think that's where preparation comes in, and kind of looking ahead and knowing when you have a presentation, you start to work on it or contacting people. Again, you feel like you may not be an expert, but trust me that you probably know more about the subject you're presenting than most people in the room. Obviously, senior faculty may, but use that. That's fine. You can always have the faculty help you and talk you through it. There are set presentations, so like for example, M&M, but I think even in M&M you could have somewhat of an objective slide and a summary slide where you kind of bookend your presentation and let everybody know what you want to talk about. And then as of everything that we do, you guys are learning, so it's okay to make mistakes. Any questions or comments? Anyone from home, feel free, unmute yourself. I see Chris wrote, think about the humor photos that you're using. Ask yourself if this is appropriate. I think that's definitely important. Sometimes we're doing quick Google searches and we don't think about what's going on. Any senior faculty, any experiences or comments?
I would add, Jimmy, especially if you're going to be somewhere that you're not used to being, actually nice to go there the day before your lecture. If you're at a national meeting, you know you're going to be, so you know where it is, and you look at the room, and you know that it just makes it a little bit more comfortable. It's not the first time you're seeing it, and that's helped me.
Yeah, definitely. That's what Dr. Lucchese said, especially if you're going to a new place or a national meeting, going to the room the day before, or definitely a couple of hours before, and just so it's not the first time you're seeing that place, and you're not jarred by it. And again, checking out the media and everything, I think that's a really good point. Shane asked one of our new interns, are we recording lectures? We actually record every conference, so yes, you should be able to get that and be able to self-critique yourself. I'm also, if you ever want specific feedback from me, I don't always get the feedback cards, but I'm always happy to give anyone feedback on public speaking or to meet with you guys beforehand and rehearse it. Dr. Silver?
I recently learned that there's actually a way in PowerPoint to cut out the backgrounds from images so you can have just the image up there you want. I've only done it once or twice, so I don't totally remember how to do it, but I'll send it out to the group. Once I go back to PowerPoint, open it and look at it and do it. But I'll send out instructions on how to do it. Because it makes the slides look really nice when you remove the backgrounds and only have the image that you want.
So Dr. Silverberg said this is a way to cut out the background of the images that you want to use in PowerPoint. He's going to send it out to everyone. Dr. Barron says if the podium is tall and you are short, stand in front of the podium. That might be from personal experience, I'm not sure. All right, so as I said, you want to finish strong, so ideally having your learning points, the summary should be the last slide. So I think every presentation ideally should have an objective or an introductory slide, as well as a summary and a learning point slide. Max, you should really kind of keep it to 4 to 5 learning points. As I said, 3 is probably ideal. That's really what the maximum amount of information people are going to take away. PowerPoint's a tool. It's not for you to read off of, so use it wisely and use it for the audience. Time management is paramount, so think about how long your presentation is going to be, and then just respect the person who's running the conference as well as your audience in terms of how much time you're using. And then you might notice that I've said this probably more than 6 times. I think rehearsal is really the number one thing